Hey guys, my name is Matthew, and today we're talking about why you should not read more, or why you should actually read less. Here we go. All right, so I want to start this video off just by saying I'm not telling you what to do. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. Read as many books as you want. Read as much of whatever it is you want to read as much as you want to. But I want to just help you think of it some perspective, a little bit of perspective, and help you to be really intentional with the way that you do your reading. So don't just read because you feel like you have to or something, and also be aware of some of the reading that you're already doing. I'm going to give you 5 different reasons why it might be better for you to read less and not more. Not all these reasons may apply to you, but you might be surprised by how many do. This first one probably applies to almost everyone. You actually read more than you think you do. And this is important because reading actually does take energy and effort, and it can take away from some of the more intentional reading you may want to do. The best example of this is when you're on Facebook for an hour, let's say, and you're just kind of scrolling through. That whole time you're inundated with these headlines and these different articles and people's opinions and the political posts and everything else. And so much of it has to be read. You don't even really think about the fact that you're reading all those things, but really you are. You read a lot when you spend time on social media. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if that's what you want to be doing with your time. But for me personally, when I get out of an hour, let's say, of scrolling through Facebook, I come out of it, and if someone were to ask me the question, what did you just learn in the last hour? Or where did that benefit you in any way, reading through all those things in the last hour? I think oftentimes I would struggle to be able to answer that question. I think that's probably true for most people. See, scrolling through social media feels mindless because you're not really having to put forth the effort that a lot of effort to do that. But it actually takes more effort than you think. You're reading the whole time, you're taking in information, you're processing it, but you actually do a really bad job of storing information when you're just mindlessly kind of going through. And it's because of this kind of train of thought. A lot of times when you're reading a book, the author's taking you through a specific argument or is maybe a specific storyline or whatever. But in Facebook or any social media, you're getting kind of hit with random thoughts. And so your brain doesn't have the right shelves to store random thoughts well. So you end up walking away with nothing, a lot of times literally nothing. And so this is kind of the first thought, and it's kind of a cornerstone to this whole video, is I want you to read intentionally. I don't want you just to read. Reading for reading's sake isn't really helpful unless you're getting something out of it. That something could be entertainment. Maybe it's a value of, hey, I really enjoy doing this. But actually, I think when you ask most people, they would say, I don't actually enjoy social media. I kind of like the utility it gives me, but when I'm finished, how about this? Check yourself after an hour, like spend an hour on social media sometime. And at the end of that hour, ask yourself, honestly, is my emotional state better than it was at the beginning of that hour? And I think you'll find that it probably wasn't. Most people, it's just not. You actually feel much worse after an hour of doing this because it's an energy drain, but you gain nothing from it. The second reason why I think a lot of people read more, and maybe it'd be better to not read more, is because there's this pressure to keep up with the Joneses. I see this a lot in like book communities where they say, oh man, I read a book a week this year. I read 37 books. I read however many books. And you go, man, who cares? So I'd say just don't challenge yourself to try and keep up with someone else. Like that's not the purpose of reading. If you're like have a checklist and you're trying to get an X number of books out on your checklist and whatever, those things aren't particularly important. They have no real meaning on your life. Someone who's read 40 books but hasn't gained anything from those 40 books is not better off than someone who's only read 5 books. And in fact, they might be worse off than someone who's read 5 books. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the second reason you may want to read less instead of more, the reason you may want to read less is because you are trying to keep up with the Joneses and you're starting to recognize that that's not actually a good perspective to have with reading. Another reason you may want to read less instead of more is because you are intentionally trying to read deep instead of reading wide. What I mean by this is if you take a week and you say, hey, I want to read 10 books this week, and that's a great goal, is you say, I want to read 10 books. I don't know very many people who could probably read 10 books unless we're talking about children's books. Actually, I do read 10 books a week because of children's books. I'll have you know. But just because you're reading 10 books in a week does not mean you've gained anything of importance from those 10 books. And again, we're going to sneak into this idea of intentionality and talk about how one book in a week, or maybe even a chapter in a week, might be a lot more important than reading 10 books in a week. If you're reading 10 books in a week, then you're going to read a book, and then as soon as you're done with the first book, you're going to have to move on to the next book in order to maintain your pace and actually get to 10. The problem with that is you haven't given your mind any time to store the information from the first book. Even if it's just a storyline and it's just a novel, that means you haven't really gotten to process it. And so I want to encourage you, actually reading deep gives you the time to meditate on what you've read, to think about it, to absorb it, and to enjoy it more than if you were just reading as many books as you possibly could. A fourth reason why you may think, I need to start reading less and not more, is because the more you read, the less time you have to put into action the things that you've read. Now, this doesn't just apply to nonfiction books. It can apply to articles or to studies you've read, things like that. But it's really important that if you want to put things into action, if you want them to take real effect on your life, you probably have to read less, not more. I've got a list here of books that have actually affected my life, things that I've actually been able to take action on. Feel free to click in on one of those if you're looking for books that could actually change your life, change the way you live, make you live a better life, a more intentional life. These are the types of books you can read. But if you read all these books in one sitting, they probably won't help you change your life at all. This last reason why you might want to read less and not more is because you may want to enjoy reading your books more. This doesn't just apply to the number of books you're reading, but also the speed at which you read them. Sometimes I do this thing when I'm reading a novel where I get so excited about the action parts of the novel that I start reading faster and faster and faster, and I skip over details and I miss important parts of the plot, even though the whole reason I'm reading faster is because I want to find out what happens in the plot. It's quite paradoxical in that way. If you slow down and read a little bit less, you might actually find you enjoy the books more. You're able to get more detail from it. You're able to get more out of the book. Also, reading fewer books will also help you to remember and enjoy the books more as well. Overall, like I said in the beginning, I don't want to tell you how to read or what ways to read. In fact, if you're looking to read more, here's some tips on how you read more books. I've got a video that's exactly that. It's less than a minute long, and they're real quick fire tips on how to read more. So if you're interested in that, click in on it and figure out how to read more. But maybe you're looking to read less. Maybe you're looking to be more intentional in your reading. If so, let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any tips below on how to do this well. How do you read less? How do you read more intentionally? Let me know in the comments. This has been some of my thoughts on why you might want to read less and not more. If you enjoyed this content, do feel free to like and subscribe. And as always, stay safe out there.